Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be making our very own sandblasting cabinet. You will need an abrasive blaster tank, but for less than $50 you can make this cabinet too. This will be great for people that have limited space and don't want to get the sand everywhere anytime that they want to sandblast their parts. Here we have some pallet boards for the base, stand, and for the viewport. And for the container, we're using a 55-gallon drum that can be found on the side of the road usually for free. Additionally, here we have some sleeve material made out of old sweatshirt and some fasteners here that I just found laying around. So this build is quite inexpensive and it can be great for beginners getting started. So without further ado, let's get started. So to start off, I found this 55-gallon drum on the side of the road, and now it's mine. First thing I want to do is clean it up a little bit because it still has some gas in it. So I'm just going to be pouring it out, and then I'm going to clean it out with some Dawn dish soap and dispose of that properly. This is how much extra fuel I got out of it. Now I'm going to put some soap in it, put some water in it, shake it up to get all of the fuel and oil out of there so it's not all dirty. After mixing it up, then we gotta dispose of this properly. So first thing we want to do, take our table saw and from our schematic thing, get some wood and our barrel, and then we're just going to cut this wood to length for the 4 legs. And I have it set up so that the 4 legs are each half of my height, and I'm 5'9", so half my height is about 35 inches. So what I'm using is just some leftover wood, but if you find some thick pallet boards, you might be able to use that too, so it shouldn't be that expensive. Then basically from those 4 boards, you just put it together and then lay the drum on top of it. So for me, the stand was a little flimsy and I just wanted to make it sturdy, so I'm going to be putting bracing on the sides and the back. Here's the hole placement that I'm going to be using. I lined up the armholes approximately so that they should be fairly comfortable when I'm using it. And for the glass, I'm going to be using 2 picture frames side by side. So we need to make a frame that holds in the glass, and we're going to be putting some slits in it so the glass can slide in it and we can replace it whenever we need to. I chose picture frame glass because it's fairly inexpensive and you can find it at garage sales for pretty cheap. So here's how it should look at the end. Basically, you're just going to slide the picture frames into this frame here, and then you're going to have 2 side-by-side frames. I didn't have 2 pieces of glass at the time, so I just am using the back to show what it's going to look like. So here's the frame with 2 pieces of glass in it, and this is what we're going to be using to see through the sandblasting cabinet so we can see the things that we are sandblasting. And it's going to be approximately here. And then we also need to make a frame that fits this piece onto the cylindrical surface. So for that, I'm going to be using pallet boards, and then I'm going to be cutting out semicircles in the side of it, so that the glass in the end can be tangent to the cylindrical shape. It's also kind of important to get a semicircle on there so you get a good seal between the barrel and your wood so that when you're sandblasting it doesn't all come out. For me, it was important to have 2 separate pieces, this frame and then the frame that holds the glass, because I want the frame that holds the glass to be able to hinge up so I can actually access anything that's in there and put parts in there if I want to. And you'll see what I mean in a second where I show it. After putting it together, this is how it looks when it's mounted on the barrel. So now that we have both complete, we're going to put hinges on the top one to the bottom one so that we're able to hinge up the glass and access the inside of the barrel. So I accidentally used screws that are a little bit too long, so instead of finding smaller ones, I'm just going to cut them off. And then this might not be for every barrel, but my barrel has little notches on it, so I'm just going to cut these notches in the frame so that it fits better. And there we go, that's how it looks when it's fit to the frame. Now all that's left to do is cut out the holes so that we can have a working viewport. First we start by drilling small holes and then drill bigger holes, and then we take a cut-off wheel to cut the whole thing. As for mounting the frame to the barrel, I'm going to outline this frame, and then we're going to draw some marks where we're going to make some holes, and then the frame will be screwed into the barrel. I'll be using about 4 screws on each side just to make sure everything is mounted nicely. So after that, we're going to be mounting the viewport, and I'm just drilling the holes where we marked those dots before on the barrel, and then screwing the bracket into the barrel. And here's how it'll look when it's all done and mounted. So you can see the viewport here, and next we're going to be doing the holes for the hands. One thing I'm going to do next is trace around the holes and then find some plastic container that has about the same radius and trace it a little bit better. And since I have the angle grinder out, we're just going to cut that out now. And I found this method of doing halves is kind of tedious, and this method I do next is actually a lot easier. I just go in a circle with the angle grinder. But for me, it was a lot easier to do this with a very small angle grinder tip, just because the contact point will be much smaller. Just ensure when you're doing this to wear proper protection, such as eye goggles and gloves if you'd like to use them. And of course, grind down the sharp edges because your hands will be going in there. I should also mention that this grate that I'm using for the sandblasting cabinet is just some extra grate that we had when we were making some shelving for a pantry. So here's how it looks now. We have the bracing in the back, the viewport, and the hand holes. So to cover your hands and prevent sand from getting out, you can either use an old cloth like sweatshirt or long sleeve shirt, or you can use long gloves. I opted in for the sweatshirt because I had an old sweatshirt laying around and it was free. So first you're going to want to drill holes in the metal, and we're going to be mounting it using brackets that clamp to the inside. Here's the old sweatshirt I will be using, and we're just going to want to cut off the sleeves with a pair of scissors so we can use them. Ideally cut at the end of the sleeve so you can have a long length in case you need it. For mounting it, I'll be using these U-nut retaining bracket clamps, and they will fit between the sweatshirt and the metal barrel. And then all you have to do is take some piercing screwdriver to break through this cloth material so you can fit your bolt through, and this will clamp the material to the barrel. This seemed to work the best for me because it didn't require me to make any more brackets like I did for the viewport, because it was kind of difficult to create an arc that matched the barrel, and that would be even more difficult to make for a circular shape. And to provide more strength, I'm just adding a couple more of these retaining clips, but I'm not going to bolt them in just because they're going to wedge between there and keep it pretty sturdy. So here's how it should look when it's done, and I like it. I think it looks pretty decent, and I think it should work just fine. So now it's time to make the sand chute, which just allows the sand to exit the barrel through the bottom into a bucket so you can preserve the sand and reuse it. So now I'm just using a 14-inch cutoff wheel to cut steel pipe and then get all the sharp edges off and deburr it. Here's an easy way I found that you can find the center easily. It'll probably work a lot better with a marble, but I'm just using this. Basically, you just let it roll until it stops, and that's going to be where the center is, so that's pretty nice. So to drill this out, I'm basically just going to use a drill and then try to cut little X's in it with an angle grinder, because I can't really cut a circle in this very easily. And then I'm going to trace the approximate size of the cylinder so that I can get a decently good fit. Then with the angle grinder, we're just going to cut a couple little X's on each side of this. And from the inside, I'm going to take a hammer and a small metal punch and punch these edges outwards so that they can be cut with the angle grinder from the outside. And of course, after cutting, try to make it as cylindrical as possible for the next step to be easier. I'm going to be welding the steel tube to this barrel using my Harbor Freight MIG gun, and I'm using just flux core to stick this together. It might not be pretty, but it should work just fine. Just for reference, I'm using the 90 amp Harbor Freight on the highest setting and wire feed of 4. After that, I just want to make sure to get the inside even so that the sand can easily go through the tube. So to connect that pipe down to a bucket, I'm going to be using a hose from a old vacuum cleaner that was hanging around. And this will allow me to pivot the output of this into different buckets if I wanted to. And then I'm just attaching this with a metal hose clamp. Moving on to the light, I'm going to be using one of those small chicken lights. It's approximately 12 inches in diameter, so that should work fine if I put a nice bright LED bulb in there. First thing is to trace the outline of the light and then cut out the approximate hole with an angle grinder. We want to cut inside of that a little bit because we're going to be placing the light on the inside and then mounting it around there. And then you might need to take an angle grinder just to make the fit well. So when I said mounting before, this is what I mean. Basically, we're just going to put holes in this metal and then mount the light from the inside here. And next step is to struggle putting the light in, because it was difficult for me to line it up correctly. But once you get it, this is how it should look. And it actually aims the light at quite a good angle to see your part that you're working on. So now that we've completed our project, it's time to test it. First, we have to pour in our sand into the sandblaster and screw on the cap. After we complete that, we can plug in the air and pump up the tank. The hose from the sandblaster tank will then go through the opening in the 55-gallon drum so that we can use the sandblaster. And now I'm going to show you guys how it works. Here I have an ancient iron that I will be sandblasting to demonstrate. Using gloves and the sleeves should keep me relatively clean. And here we go. The visibility wasn't too terrible, but you definitely have to get a good ratio of sand to air so that you can see everything properly. After finishing, this is how it looks. You can see that the sandblasting did do a great job at getting all of the rust off. This rust did go pretty deep, so you can see the iron here. After finishing, then you can take out the grates and then push all of the sand towards the center. Well, it will go down the pipe and be collected into a bucket. You can then recycle this sand and use it for next time. And that concludes our testing. So thanks for sticking around and watching this video. If you're going to make your own sandblaster, I hope this helped. Leave a thumbs up and subscribe.